But welcome, you are at the right spot. I hope we're ready to start our monthly webinar on social connectedness. Our topic today is programs to strengthen social connectedness among young adults. Okay, we're just going to go ahead and get going. So we have the full hour to do this work. I'm Danielle Varda. I am the CEO and founder at Visible Network Labs. I'm also an associate professor in the School of Public Affairs at the University of Colorado, Denver. And I play a few other roles, but those are the two that I represent on these webinars. And I'm really glad that you have joined us today. We are really excited about today's amazing speakers and programs that we'll be talking about. Today, we have three speakers with us. The first, Danielle Martinez. He is an assistant program manager at the Center for Public Health Practice at the Colorado School of Public Health. And Danielle is going to speak today about a network that he has founded and worked on called the Colorado Queer Rural Health Network. He provides technical assistance to youth workers across Colorado to engage with young people in more authentic ways, and also co-leads a statewide youth action board and is currently serving the Queer Youth Network in Southwestern Colorado. Authentic community partnerships is at the core of his work. We also have Tinkham. Kini is the executive director of the Maine Resilience Building Network. Kini has worked in public health and healthcare for close to 40 years and works to improve the health and well-being of children, families, and communities by advancing the MRBN mission through capacity building, systems integration, resilience workforce development, policy, and advocacy. Kini brings extensive systems transformation leadership experience aimed at the integration of community and health systems through strategies to advance equity and promote a resilience-framed approach to public health. And finally, we also have DL Paz Ryant. Paz is the executive director and co-founder of the Apprentice of Peace Youth Organization, a nonprofit that focuses on reducing mental health stigma and increasing life skills through wellness. In his leadership role, Paz is charged with strategy, positive youth development, and building community while creating innovative ways to address mental health stigma and the intersectionality of youth violence. He has an extensive background in working with youth in sports and social emotional learning, from coaching basketball to teaching wellness and positive mental attitude strategies. Paz is proud to work in the arena of mental health stigma awareness and reduction, working with youth locally, nationally, and abroad. So you can tell we have a really great panel of folks today to help us explore this topic, think more about how to support youth around their social connectedness. I'm going to start with just a little bit of background about Visible Network Labs. We're the host of this webinar. Our goal is to make invisible networks visible. We all know that we're embedded in these social support systems, but they're largely invisible to both ourselves and the people trying to care for us. So it's our mission to do the work that we can to help make them visible so that we can integrate that into the ways that we help people through social support, healthcare, mental health, and different aspects of wellness. This is our team at Visible Network Labs. We're a social enterprise dedicated to strengthening social connectedness. And we have a vision that everyone has the social support they need. And we're working on ways to try to make that happen through learning opportunities and sharing opportunities like today. We also build technology-based data and mapping tools to try to make those networks visible. This is our team. I like to just kind of acknowledge all the people who are working hard on this stuff. We have about 25 people, and I always say we wake up every morning to solve, issues like social isolation and connectedness and depression and things like that through social support. So I like to acknowledge that we have a pretty big team of people who are working hard on that. All right. Well, a couple just last things. Our focus, our lens on social connectedness is really through a systems lens, and we use network science as that approach. But our goal is to think about social connectedness both for the individual and also the system, the ecosystems and systems of care that support that, all the way up to legislation, policy, government, action around that. So we have a set of webinars that deal with the different populations that we're thinking about, but also kind of levels of social connectedness. And so lots more on that in another webinar, but and I always like to kind of show off a little bit of the things that we support and provide to communities. We have a partner platform that helps systems track this work at the ecosystem level, and then Partner Me is our tool that we actually covered a little bit in our first webinar series that is meant to help make social support systems visible to your doctors, providers, teachers, social workers in a way that we can integrate it then into our care. So it's a really neat interactive tool that really lets people kind of draw and talk about things that their strengths and also their gaps in their social support systems. All right, the goal for our webinar series is to do two primary things. One is to strengthen social connectedness. That's our mission. It's what we're all here, I think, on the call to do. And the second is to really create a learning or to build and bring together a learning innovation community around this work. And so you who are attending on the call are a pretty important part of the piece of the puzzle to get this all kind of figured out, or at least take a step forward in that. So please put your name, who you are, in the chat and let us know why you're here. We really want to get to know each other. Two last quick things. Our webinar next month, we'll be focusing on social connectedness among veterans. Every month we're doing a different webinar on a different topic, whether it be a certain population or even an approach like technology solutions or policy solutions. We're also always looking for people who want to speak and be a part of this. So please let us know if that's something you'd be interested in. We've built a lot of relationships already in just our first 3 months of doing these webinars. Okay, so I'm going to transition right over into what we call Visible Us. So before we start the webinar, obviously we have a really great panel of people and programs to talk about, but we like to spend a minute and figure out who's here and what is the community that is growing and that we are privileged to be a part of. So what we'd love for you to do is use this QR code, or you can go to the link right here and use the code that's in there. We can put that into the chat as well. And we just have a couple of questions that we want you to answer so that we can make visible a little bit of our audience and who's here. And you've probably been here before, some of you, and done this, but we like to do it each time. So what I'm going to do is actually switch over. So sorry, I have to stop sharing my screen to get to the correct screen here of our mentee so that we can, let's see if I can actually do this right. So we can, there we go, get to our April mentee. Okay, so what I'd love for you to do, so if this is, oh great, it's working. I never know, it's a leap of faith whether I'm gonna get this right. So the first question is, let's just see who's here today. So what 3 words describe you? And we don't want you to necessarily just say you're the executive director of the best organization ever, but also like adjectives about yourself. You know, if you're a family member, what's your hobby? Visible Us we do because our goal is to make sure that, oh, I have the wrong code. Oh no, the code's at the top of this. That we are actually thinking about who's on the call and what kinds of people are joining, who does this work, like what kinds of people show up to talk about social connectedness for youth. So this is really awesome. Thank you for putting in your words. We do this every time and it's just been really fun to put it all together, and we'll send it back out to you afterwards. So this is awesome. We have lots of parents here. We have nature lovers, fly fisher woman, excellent, social self, neurodivergent, harpist. Oh, imagine if we could get together for a happy hour after this and ask everyone to bring their skills. It would be awesome. A kayaker. I'm also a kayaker. I've been a whitewater kayaker for many years. Well, this was pre-children mostly. Okay. All right, well, just a few more if anyone wants to put theirs in. Community believers, this is awesome. Thank you for adding who you are. Oh, this is great. Okay, I'm gonna go to the next one as well, so we can get both of them done. And feel free to make any comments in the chat if you want. My dialogue around this is pretty bland. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So this one, what words describe what social support for young people means to you or your organization? So today we are hearing, last month we heard from our youth fellows who are doing research and work on social connectedness. And we heard straight from them what it was like to be a part of that research and also what they're finding. Today we're talking to programs that are serving youth. And so, we're curious as an organization and as organizations to supporting youth, what words, describe your mission, your purpose, your goals in helping youth. So I'll give you a few minutes to do that. Or maybe 1 minute. Great. Listening and empowering are just really showing up, and I think we're really glad to see that too. One of our discussions the panelists and our team had before this was, how do we make sure that we're always listening, bringing the voice of young people to this work? That we'll talk a little bit about that today. We don't want to just be adults talking about youth, right? I think all of us would agree on that. So really important parts. Oh, scaffolding is amazing, crucial, youth voice. People first, great. Belonging and well-being. Pay young people. I can't agree with that enough. I'm happy to say on our fellowship, we found it really important to make sure that we pay everyone, including our youth, for their lived experiences and expertise that they bring to our work. So great. Okay. Well, thank you all so much. We'll capture these in the slides we send back out. We'll send them with us. So let me see if I can get back to my slides. Danielle, I can see you. Did I get there? Am I back at the slide? Can you just give me? Okay, great. I just never know if I'm showing like my private stuff. Okay, so thank you all for doing that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to continue on with our Visible Us, but I'm going to focus on our speakers today. I attend a lot of webinars and I hear a lot of people speaking, and I always want to know, like, who are these people behind these projects and what got them to where they are today. So we want to spend just a minute getting to know who these people are on a more personal level. So I'm going to ask each of you to just answer a couple of questions here. I'm going to ask it together, to tell us what really inspired you to work with youth-centered programs. And, just briefly, but what's your story? What was your journey to get you to where you are today in this kind of role? So why don't I start with Kini? There we go.
Hi. Yeah. So the first question, what inspired you to do your work with youth-centered programs? I think I was inspired through my career as a school nurse and a youth advisor for about 12 years. Maine is a large state, and we had the good fortune of having a lot of youth serving programs that worked in school settings. And we were able to bring groups of youth, cross-sector groups of youth, to our school-based health center in a leadership role, and to watch them to grow and develop their voice and understand their, to listen to them understand and recognize how they can empower their own health and their voice through advocacy and supporting the work in the school that they did. So I think it's my long setting with youth at the school-based health center and my connection to adolescents there, and bringing them through and helping them understand advocacy. Mm-hmm. And it might have been easier to start with the second question about who I am. Do you want me to do that, or are we waiting?
No, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. No, thank you. So my background, I'm a registered nurse. My early career was in maternal and child health. I was a labor nurse for a number of years before going into leadership, but it really grounded me to understand that there are no two families alike, and that everybody showed up to have their babies and do the very best they could. And it was our role, my role, to support them and meet them where they're at. And then moving that work to community health as well, to support families going home with their new child into communities, into their homes, and just supporting them, again, meeting them where they're at. And then that developmental work across my career, leading in the later years before I moved into more public health work, but working with adolescents. So I really enjoyed the continuum of children in their development. And I just love our state and our community. So this positive connection is really a key for me in my work.
Awesome. Oh, thank you, Kini, for sharing. I'm learning more about you every time. Paz, do you mind going next and telling us a little bit about your story?
You want me to start with the story?
Either one, whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be in space with you all. I'll start with the first question. What inspired me to work with youth-centered programs? I think just, growing up in an environment and seeing these things happening, in communities that I was in or around, and not having, access to programs or awareness of various programs, dealing with some of the stigma around mental health, being able to work with students and listening just to some of the conversations, being able to hear some of what they were saying, and really that kind of leads our work, is listening to the students and hearing what they're saying and or what they're interested in and want, and trying to work to provide those things or opportunities for them. So I think that's what really inspired the work, and seeing people before me, as well as people currently just doing the work and being inspired to want to be a part of, creating change and impact, positive impact in our community. I guess the story of my journey, I'm originally from South Carolina, but I live here in Colorado. Been living here for 20 plus years, and I don't know, there wasn't a lot of these opportunities, I think, for me, or wasn't aware of them. And apparently a lot of students still aren't aware of these types of opportunities. It's still a thing. So I really want to, impact in that area and be a resource and or try to increase the awareness of these resources that are available out here for students. A lot of times they're just not connected to. I started working with youth through sports, and that led to being a big brother, being a part of Big Brother Big Sister program, where I did that for a few years, and kind of in the midst of that started figuring out how I wanted to do it, something I always wanted to do. And then I met my partner, and we just took Tai Chi and wellness and a book that my partner had started writing called The Apprentice of Peace and Uncommon Dialogue. And we just put it all together into, this opportunity to work with students. And it continues to grow in that sense, because mental health was not necessarily the terminology we were using, or social emotional awareness or anything like that. But it very quickly became apparent how important and, the meaning of those words, because we were having those conversations. And so it just kind of grew in that sense. And I've had the opportunity to just continue to learn and be in space with wonderful people and learn and try to grow in my skills to create impact.
Thank you. I mean, we've known each other for a while, and I didn't know half of that. So thanks for sharing. All right, Danielle, how about you?
Thank y'all for having me. And funny enough, that first question was, I will always remember, it was an interview question for my current position. And so I remembered actually back to high school, there was, I think, two main reasons why I am kind of on the trajectory that I have been. And it was one of my uncles, who I used to hang out with after school, because he lived close by. He and I just really grew really close during high school. And it was just because he listened to me and took me seriously and didn't dismiss the things I said. And then also my school counselor was really good at making space for us and hearing us when we needed it, and she was very much meeting us where we were at a lot of the time. And so I would say those two things, those two moments or experiences really got me onto Oh, things can be really good for as a young person if you do have like adults that are supporting you. And I really got that like outside of your family. I really got that at a young age, luckily, and that kind of just set me on my way. And I always knew from the moment I graduated from high school that I wanted to work with youth or teens, but I just didn't know how. And so this goes into the how did I get here today? I thought I was going to be a school psychologist. I did not want to get my PhD, however, so I decided to go get my master's in social work. And while I was there, while I was getting my master's at DU, I'm originally from Texas, been in Denver for almost 8 years now. But I went to go get my master's in DU for a master's of social work, and I made sure that all of my internships were youth centric. And so I was in a drop-in center my second year for queer youth called Rainbow Alley here in Denver. And it was one of the best experiences where I got to just see young people living their their like authentic lives and dealing with a lot of difficult things outside of what was going on at Rainbow Alley, but just like seeing that weight lifted and just like seeing them become who they truly are was just, it will always hold a special place in my heart and really helped me in my own growth as a queer person as well. And then in my first year internship, I was in a after school program in the public housing areas here in Denver. And that was also a great experience because I got to learn what it meant to facilitate, what it meant to really meet young people where they're at, depending on like the day and the situation, the holiday, whatever it was. And it was just like a really great experience for me. And I kept wanting to have this like impact. And so I decided to go into child welfare for a couple of years. And that was it's a hard job, just to be honest. It's 100% one of the hardest things I think I've ever done in my life. And at the same time, I learned so much about like what young folks who are in many different systems, kind of just being shuffled from one system to the next, kind of like what is that experience for them? And again, what did it mean to have somebody who was trying to be in their corner, but was also kind of limited depending on the systems of what we could do. But again, I saw that like what they needed. And so after I was done with child welfare, I was like, I need to go back to like youth empowerment, youth work. And I joined an organization at the time. It was called Uprise. It was a grant where we take a social justice approach to youth tobacco work. And that has beautifully grown into a team that now has many projects. And so we've become a hub for justice-centered youth engagement. And now I work on Uprise, which I love and has been really fulfilling. And I've been able to partner with One Colorado and one of my teammates, and we are doing this queer world network. And so this little piece of me where that like got to see all the stuff at Rainbow Alley is just really happy because I get to try and replicate or do something similar, but in an online space for youth across Colorado and not just in the Denver metro. So that's just a little brief story about how I got here.
Well, thank you so much. It's really awesome to see how one thing leads to another to make big things happen. And so I think your story really shows us that. I did see that we both went to the University of Texas at Austin. So we'll have to catch up on that later. Okay, so let's thank you all so much for sharing a little bit of yourself and exposing your story to all of us. I think it really matters and it means a lot to us to understand what has motivated you and how you got here. And I just want to say a big thank you for being a part of this community with us and sharing your stories about your programs. So with that, we are going to go into that. So kind of the content now of our webinar to talk about programs that strengthen social connectedness amongst young people. We're going to go ahead and start with Kini and the Maine Resilience Building Network. So I'm moving slides. So Kini, just kind of, you can even raise your hand or just tell me to go on when you're ready.
Thanks so much.
Go ahead.
So again, the program that I'm going to talk about today is Cultivating Youth Mattering. It's an initiative that we started about 2.5 years ago at the Maine Resilience network. And I'll have you move. Thank you. We are a strong network in Maine. We are about 2,500 people that are connected through public health, business, healthcare, that attend our meetings and stay connected through programming and in-person meetings back pre-pandemic, back in the day. And that just, I just lay that grounding for you to really talk about the impact we have in doing this work on mattering. So we have some very compelling data in Maine that I'll show you in a minute that called out youth not feeling connected in their communities. So Mervyn provided a forum to have conversations across the state in our public health districts to listen and learn to a cross sector of individuals, some youth, mostly adults working in different sectors to understand about mattering in their communities. And through these listening sessions, we developed our program, and I'll talk more about the tools and the resources. But we really strongly believe that we need to address this issue through primary prevention, going way upstream, right, and really connecting in authentic ways with our youth in communities, that we all own a piece of our community. It's where we live and work and play, right? And we've raised our families, or we're choosing to have a career in these communities. But more importantly is like, who are the youth that are growing up, right? That will be our next generation of adults. So this changing mattering is really about going way upstream through prevention and not having to deal with the downstream outcomes that we're currently facing across our country, and very much here in Maine around chronic illness, suicide ideation and suicides, and substance use disorder. And again, high rates of depression and anxiety in Maine. So next, please. Thanks. So we, through our research, we connected with some wonderful national leaders. Christina Bethel worked with us along with Dr. Gordon Flett. And this is the definition of mattering. So mattering is a sense of being significant and valued by other people. So if you believe you matter to others, we know that's the key protective resource that can buffer us from life stressors and challenges throughout life. And it's very different than belonging. When you are seen, heard, and valued, and more importantly, you're missed, right? If you're not there, that's mattering. Where you could belong to a basketball team, or you could belong to theater, but never be chosen for a role that you're working in the background. And you might want to tip and test being in the theater on stage. So it's very different. And we recognize that the power of mattering can support us through positive connections and community is the approach that we're taking. Thank you. So mattering, as you know, is very much aligned with social connectedness. And we talk about this is, being community conditions and environments where we live, work, and play. And we like to highlight that it's receiving as a priority with the US CDC as one of the 5 priority social determinants. And we know that youth connecting has this lasting effect. We're fortunate to have some good research in at the CDC level, which I'll talk more about in a minute as well. So mattering has 3 domains, and it's really important to understand this and think about, okay, where's our role in supporting anybody to matter, right? Not only children, right? But in adolescents, but any of us. So we can matter at home, work or school, and community. And I imagine if we pause, we can think about a time where, you felt like you didn't matter in your workplace, or maybe in your home, right? Or in community somewhere that you just felt like you didn't make a difference. No one saw you. You didn't feel seen, heard, and valued. We're fortunate in Maine to have a data set, the Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey, that provides data every 2 years to us to understand youth feeling connected, having somebody that loves and supports them in their home. We also measure in Maine that you are connected to a caring adult, a teacher in the school, And then, do you feel like you matter in your community? And it's that data set around mattering community that we decided to move forward with this initiative to really prevent, more importantly, but to address social connectedness and many of the diseases of despair, such as suicide and anxiety and depression. This data set from 2019, and we're waiting to get our new data set from 2021. But 43% of high school students felt like they did not matter in their community in Maine. So think about that, right? That's close to half of our youth do not feel connected in their community, that they don't matter. 20% of our middle school students also had seriously thought about killing themselves. So we have data for mattering in both middle school and high school, and it is about 50% total feel like they do not matter in the community where they live. And we also know from the data in Maine that there are populations of youth, and although we do have youth of color in Maine and Indigenous youth, the numbers are so small that we're not able to get data on that those individuals. But we do have data from youth who report being LGBTQ on this particular data set, and we know that they're less likely to have supports from adults and twice as likely to have 4 or more adverse childhood experiences, and that we know than their non-LGBT youth. So we know the impact of early adversity in one's life, how that impacts us later throughout life and into our adulthood. And you see that we also have data here that speaks to those 3 domains for non-LGBT versus LGBT youth. So we have this data, and it's like, what do we do with it? So again, Mervyn stepped up and thought, we live in a great state, a very rural state, but some urban conditions as well. And how can we make a difference through education and awareness, but moving communities to solutions to really do this wraparound approach to begin to understand what youth want in their communities. And it's really rooted in bringing youth to the table to be part of the solution. It's not adults telling youth what they need in community. Thanks. This goes back to the data from the US CDC that youth who had family and school connections had much greater positive health outcomes as adults too. So this is national data from the US CDC, and we're following our data in Maine, looking at this initiative for out 15 years, every 2 years, being able to move the dial and shift the dial on the mattering in Maine. At the heart of this program really is equity, right? It's like, who are the young people that live in their communities? What are the community conditions where people live, right? So connectedness, if you live in rural Maine, you may live 14 miles from the general store, or you may live 24 miles from your closest friend or someone that you identify that you want to be with, right? We know there's food security issues in Maine. We know there's a lot of poverty issues in Maine. So we're taking this initiative to the business leaders and to community leaders to help them understand the need for community solutions to address what keeps young people from not telling us that they matter in community. This study here speaks to some of the ways that we can connect with youth. Certainly, we had a great example just shared with us about youth-adult relationships, that caring, stable adult, that really meaningful relationship in community outside of the home. Do we have public spaces that are safe and welcoming for youth? I know we've had spaces in Maine where we had signage that said, no youth under 18 allowed to hang here, or the park closes if you're a minor at 7 p.m. So we're looking to change those policies, big P's and little P's in communities, help them think about how they can create safe spaces that are really welcoming for youth. And then actually including youth, these diverse groups of youth, into community solutions. So we're to have developed some tools and resources, a community youth guide for youth thriving, which invites youth to be at the table to work with cross-sector of individuals in their community, recognizing that all of our communities are very unique in Maine and of course nationally, to help understand what it is youth need to feel connected. So they want to stay in their community, or maybe they go to school and come back to community, or they want to have a job and stay connected to the community where they live. So in what are ways that we can really have authentic engagement? So people often ask us when we have these conversations in communities or with business leaders and civic leaders, our neighbors, and that's really a key component here, right? So no matter where any of us live, we're all a community member. We're a neighbor, right? So we all own this solution, right? It's not, you can't say, oh, business owns this or the civic owns this. It's really a community issue to solve. But I know every day how I show up and engage as a community member, whether it's talking to someone riding their bike on my rural road with a fishing pole on the, hanging out in the back saying, where are you going? Where are you going to fish today? Or anything biting, like being authentic, engaging, right? But people will say to us, well, what do I say? How do I do it? They want to know how to get started. And we really talk to them about really being authentic and meeting youth where they're at and being genuine, pausing, taking the time, making eye contact, building relationship with them so they feel mattering. An example, many of our communities have little community stores where youth will pop in maybe and buy a drink and leave after school, as an example. Just think about your role of saying, hi, how you doing today? Or I haven't seen you for a couple of days. Where you been? I missed you. It's that type of authentic engagement that's mattering. And that goes a long way for positive mental health. And that's in working with many of our community programs who are part of this initiative. We're really hoping to shift the mental health, go upstream, prevention, and help young people today feel more connected and wanting to be out in communities by providing these really safe spaces for them to show up. So I'm happy to share more with you. Again, you can visit our website to learn more about the Mattering Initiative. The program tools and resources are on the website, and we'll be releasing our Youth Thriving Guide, which is really a roadmap for communities to work on the issue of engaging youth and working with youth across all populations to figure out what is the community solution for them to feel engaged.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kini. I'm going to save all of our questions to the end and go through these, but I want to encourage everyone who has questions for Kini to put them in the chat, and we'll gather them up after we get Danielle and Paz to go through their presentation. I just want to say one comment. I am most excited about the conversation here that talks about solutions. I think that we're all here for the same reason, because we understand some of the problems, and it's just really hard to get to solutions, and you've offered so many. And I know that what we're about to hear are two really creative also programs and solutions. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it on right now to Paz, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about the Apprentice of Peace Youth Organization. So I'll hand it over, Paz.
I'm gonna do my best to try to follow up on that, all of the information and work that Kini just did. Thank you for that. The Apprentice of Peace Youth Organization, it was started by my partner Ronnie and I in the park. We started doing wellness and having sessions, Tai Chi sessions and different wellness sessions in the park, along with doing African drumming, and the community just was coming out, and it, kids started coming out, and we were like, wow, they really was taking to the Tai Chi and some of the stuff that we were doing. And both my partner and I, we both went through a 5-year medical Qigong training. So in essence, we're like Chinese doctors, if you will. And then we were practicing with two master Tai Chi instructors as well, and ultimately incorporated those principles, some of those practices and principles and things into our program. So the Apprentice of Peace, we incorporate principles of Tai Chi into our programming, along with some of the principles from the book that we put out. And we provide programming for students, families, and community. If you go to the next slide, please. This is a copy of the book, or image of the book, and it's called The Apprentice of Peace and Uncommon Dialogue. And one of the first questions in there that we talk with students about is, how do you believe in yourself when it doesn't show in your actions? Because being an apprentice of peace is really about being your best self, mentally, physically, spiritually, and energetically. The three principles that we use to kind of facilitate conversation and workshop with focuses on what we call the RCA, which is realizations. So we have a round of realizations, kind of basically aha moments, things that have happened or occurred that, cause us to have that spark, or, generate that understanding. And we talk about those things and what led to it, what happened, and whether it was something intentional or something happened, or, however it occurred. And then committing our effort to that realization, or to whatever our realization is about in terms of being our best self, and then accepting all of the hard work that it takes to do that, and be our best self, and continue consistently commit our effort, right? And which means sometimes we got to give up some things. Sometimes we don't get to do some of the things that everybody else does, and all of that type of stuff. So we really talk about those things, and then we create basically what we call a 9-point philosophy, which is the RCA GPS, which stands for goal, plan, and strategy, and getting them to think about creating goals and plans and strategy around being their best self, and then how that looks for themselves, the community, and the world. Our mission is to engage, students through a whole person approach, which for us, whole person approach is leadership, identity, and community. And it's really about, meeting students where they're at, striving to create, a level of support and platform that allows them to really partner with us as the adults, because, and it's straight out of the students' mouth. Like a lot of times, people say youth adult partnership, or they're working with, students, but that's not really the case. It's the adults basically telling them what they're going to do or how they're going to do things. And I think it's, super important to be able to allow for them to be able to make certain decisions, or be a part of decision making, and making suggestions, and those types of things. If we go to the next slide, please. So what is Tai Chi? It's a ancient martial art and wellness system that consists of slow movements and forms. And for most, it's considered to be like a moving meditation, very somewhat similar to yoga in a sense. While yoga is more static, the Tai Chi is definitely more moving. And it's the application of yin and yang principles, or balancing energies. So we talk about, balance a lot, and our energy, and how to balance our energies. For example, with young people, and people in general, right? We can easily get upset, get angry, and really get, very high on the emotional scale. So it's like, okay, what's the balance? Then, the balance is asking questions, and kind of, encouraging people to calm down, and take a breath, to talk about what's going on, as opposed to meeting them where they are, which we know is ultimately going to create conflict, or increase the conflict, or cause more conflict. So we talk about that, and really striving to understand energy in that sense, and how to balance energy in those types of situations, because conflict management and resolution is a huge piece, especially for youth, and even for adults, is a huge issue in and of itself. So trying to understand how to diffuse that, and especially when we're talking about youth violence and those types of things. And the name Tai Chi itself just means perfect balance and harmony. That's what it means. And so those are kind of the principles and things that we get to talk about. And it's not just talking about it, they're actually getting to do it which I think is a huge part of it as well too, because then they actually feel it in their body and can say, oh, and a lot of times they say, man, I never felt that before, because they're not truly aware or conscious, I think, of breath, you know, and the impact of breath and movement and those types of things, which, you know, exercise just makes us feel good, period. If we go to the next slide, and so pretty much our programs, we started off with our flagship program, which was Tai Chi for Peace. And it was really about the principles in the book, having what we call courageous or brave conversations, and then having the movement as a part of that. And like I said, in those conversations, a lot of things were coming up. A lot of things were coming up because we were having intentional conversations again around being the best self, what's happening in their life, what, you know, different sorts of things. And, you know, suicide would come up, suicidal thoughts, or, you know, different things like that. Mental health concerns. You know, we had a lot of students that, you know, when the DACA thing was a huge deal, that was a huge issue as well, where a lot of students, you know, felt a certain way about that, and wasn't coming to school, and just a lot of different things that came up and just kind of made us be more intentional about how we were facilitating the program and some of the things that we were doing. And so we started doing more enrichment programs, and infusing mental health awareness, if you will, in it through comic book creation, through lyrical expression, which is poetry and spoken word, those types of things, fashion design. And then we had youth advisory councils as well. And we've since kind of remodeled our youth advisory council, but what they were doing is they have a campaign called the Value of Life campaign, where they were sharing mental health messages and awareness and positive messages around reducing mental health stigma. And they were creating these messages on apparel, which we then had fashion shows that allowed us to bring in groups of people to talk about the real issue. So the fashion just kind of got them there, but then they would lead the conversation and talk about what was going on, different support that was needed, and, you know, just what was kind of going on, especially as it related to the youth violence. Because for those of you who are familiar or not familiar, in the Denver area, there's definitely been a slew of violence that has been going on, I mean, really nonstop. But definitely, I mean, just within the last few months, we've had several school shootings, you know, multiple shootings where multiple people or students were, you know, shot or hurt. Like it is really an ongoing, you know, thing. And even with the last school shooting, there was a school, you know, with the school shooting, or not the last one, but one of the more recent ones, and probably nationally known ones, with the Aurora ones, where there was a shooting, and then a couple of days later where they were trying to do a healing march, and there was another shooting, like literally at the school right after that, or another school. So there's a lot of violence, a lot of things that have been going on amidst the youth during this time. But we've again separated out our youth council more so by age group, and that's based on some of the discussions that we've been having with the students, to where now we're working specifically with middle school, high school, young adults, and then we have mentors who we're working with as well. And then for our enrichment programs, the littles or elementary school students will be kind of starting in that Tai Chi for Peace place. And then we have career pathways, because that is definitely something that, from a connected standpoint, that the students just aren't connected to for some reason. And it's really sad, because I know adults who talk about not being connected to those resources and having to struggle to figure it out. And yet we still have students in the same place at this very moment who are struggling with that same thing. And it just baffles me. And, you know, I've had conversations with school administrators before about all of our students are going to college. And I'm like, whoa, I highly doubt that. But, you know, whatever floats your boat. And, you know, so just really fighting for the students in that space and trying to provide them with opportunities and experiences to figure out what they really want to do, and then mentors to support the work. So, you know, that's I think really where we at. Again, Colorado is definitely increasing in terms of the student suicide attempts and or consideration, and just the isolation that has kind of developed over the course of this pandemic. But like you said, I think you were saying a little bit of this, Kini, about, you know, not being able to go to certain places being limited. Like it is a really, you know, effect across the board. And maybe some things that we're not even thinking about or considering, because we're not youth, so we're not thinking about it from that perspective, and we're adults, and it's like, oh well, this is good for us. We don't want to be around other people. And the kids are like, no, I want to be around everybody and my friends and all of the things. So very challenging, I think, space to be in right now, but even more so important why all of us are here, I think. And, you know, it's important work that we're doing and important that we work together and communicate and share resources. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Paz. That's amazing work. And some may know I'm also a school board director, and I just love that you center this work in schools. And I think right now we're really trying to find resources in schools for kids to get through all of these things. And we have questions about access and things like this. I'm going to save it. Daniel could go. I have a feeling we might run over a little bit here if folks have time to stay. But Daniel, so thank you, Paz. So much good work and many questions, I think, coming out of your presentations. Daniel, I'm going to switch over to you now so you can tell us a little bit about the Colorado Queer Rural Health Network. There we go. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. So I'm going to be talking about the Colorado Queer Rural Youth Network. And so this is a newer network, and we are in the very beginning stages. So the work that I'm going to talk about is kind of the work on the staff side that we've envisioned, and then some of the things that we are hoping happen, or maybe we'll see if they happen. So next slide, please. So just like a real quick, our story. This is a grant that we received, and we had to write this at least twice. And so a little over about a year and a half ago, we had written this grant. My supervisor came to me and had just been wrapped hers up, but she was hearing from the people that she was working with in her grant that they wanted to do something around LGBTQ youth in rural spaces. And at the time, it was specifically in southwestern Colorado. And so she came out to me and knew that this was something I wanted to come back into. And me and another one of my coworkers, his name is Noah, who, funny enough, was a young person that I worked with in Rainbow Alley. And so now he's my coworker. So it's really interesting to see the full circle of that relationship continuing to evolve. But she came to us and was like, hey, would you all be interested in writing this grant? And so we did. It was a good grant. However, it didn't like fulfill some of the aspects that they were looking for. So we were passed up, but we were highly encouraged to try again. And so we did. But this time we partnered with One Colorado, which is a organization here in Colorado that really does a lot of work around policy and kind of just overall queer work here in the state, mostly on that policy level. And so we were like, this would be a really great opportunity to partner with One Colorado and to really get more resources in if we were to get this. One Colorado was also a natural choice in that they also work with the GSAs across the entire state. And so we were able to get this grant, and we found out at the end of 2021. And so this year has been all about this so far. It's been a lot about recruiting. And what we have found really in our recruiting talk with our partners and with community is right now, community capacity is at an all-time high. And it's been really difficult to get communities to be able to take this on. So originally, when we were trying to do this the second time, we were like, we'll help you write it. We'll still be contractors on this. However, we think they want, the foundation wants to put this in community hands, which makes complete sense since communities know what they need. However, all of them are like, we don't have the capacity and we do not have kind of the groundwork for this. This is what you have and we want you to do that. So again, One Colorado is the natural space there. But what we've also seen is that, again, because of the capacities being so high, and because of everything that has come with the pandemic, young folks were a little kind of skeptical of joining yet another group, especially another group where we first kind of put it forward as like, oh, we're going to be doing things and accomplishing things. And I think they were kind of burnt out on that. And that is like direct, things we heard directly from the adult sponsor that we work with, they were like, yeah, they just keep telling us they want to hang out. Like they're just kind of tired of being like doing things all the time. And we were like, okay, well, this role is we've been highlighting, the end goal, which is to like talk about community problems that they're seeing and want to address and these types of things. But really, one of the main roles of this is just to hang out and to like create this group of rural youth across Colorado who are queer. Hopefully, we can get a large number of young queer folks of color because they are often underrepresented, especially in rural spaces. And so like those were our goals. And we were like, this is a hangout space. And yes, there's going to be other goals, but like, let's switch that up. And so we did. And as soon as we like switched up from, hey, we're going to be doing very specific things all the time to like, part of how we get there is hanging out and having like this fun, getting to know each other and really building a network. And so if we can go over to the next slide, please. So talking about that, before I go into this, we have recently only had about 2 meetings, but part of that was us having them name what is a network. And so a lot of that for them was like, well, a network is like a support and it is about like showing up authentically and all these things. And I was like, okay, and that is really what we're trying to do here. And like all these other things will come, but they will also come more naturally once we have like that hangout time. So like if that is all you're needing here, especially at the beginning, let's use that time to really create that vulnerability and create that space for each other. And so that's kind of going over here to our programming goals. We wanted to create a space for connection, support, that safe and brave space. We want them to be able to disagree with each other on things, but also feel safe enough to just show up authentically as who they are. We are affirming their identities. And so with queer folks, this can mean a lot of different things, but one of the main things we have told them when they come is, if you're trying new names are incredibly important. Think of everybody here, I want you to think about your name real quick and what it means to you. Queer youth, especially those who are trans or gender expansive, are sometimes that name, that gift that was given to us by our parents doesn't suit us or doesn't serve us anymore as we get older. And so sometimes that gift, while it was nice, isn't the gift that we need as we get older. And so I'm like, if you're gonna gift yourself a name or try on different pronouns or anything like that, please use this space as that. If you come in next week as he and you came in as she this week, that's cool. Nobody here is going to question you. Same thing with the name. And the amount of change that we have seen immediately, we saw people changing their names in the chat, and we saw like so much like immediately with no questions. And even in the 2 meetings, what we have seen is amazing in that each of those meetings, at least 1 or 2 young folks has come forward with like, I am so happy. Recently, I got a diagnosis of like autism, and they're just like, I'm so happy I finally got this, and like they feel this like relief. And it's just like nobody questions these things, and it's just, even in the 2 meetings we've had, what we have seen is like people just wanting to have this. And so, and I bring those things up in particular because we are going to be exploring intersections between race, class, gender, ability, and sexuality, and many more things as they come up. And we are already starting to do that and normalize it in ways that we hope can carry on with the young folks even outside of the space. And we are co-creating a vision and organizing a collective action to produce more inclusive spaces that promote belonging and healing for queer youth across the state. And what does that mean? Well, right now we are creating that space in this network. And we're hoping that this network can be self-sustaining at the end of 2 years. If not, we're going to try to figure out at that time, hey, do you want us to like help you reapply? What are the things you need in order to continue having this in your lives? We've already had youth stay after to be like, there's nothing like this in our town or in our school, and it's so important. And the reason we wanted to create a network that really incorporated the entire state and specifically in rural spaces, was queer identities are vast. So I'm just going to give you an example. You could be a non-binary person who identifies as gay and, you know, kind of dresses in more masculine ways, right? If that does not exist, if somebody else does not exist in similar ways, you are very much an island, even if there are other queer folks. You just are kind of like on your own. And our hope is that through this network, if some people have some of these identities where maybe they feel like they're the only person in their community, they're be able to at least connect with somebody with similar identities across the state and able to really like have a relationship built in order to like feel a little bit more immersed and feel a little bit closer. And then lastly, we wanted to connect youth to queer adults. We don't know what we can be unless we see it. And so for these queer young folks who are living in rural areas, a lot of the times they don't know very many queer adults or any at all, or they only see what they see kind of in media. And that's not always a realistic view of what it means, especially for people who are living what feels like a different world sometimes. And so we're just trying to connect them and be like, hey, like, look, you can also be a social worker, or you can also be, and like just showing like we are in a bunch of different roles and we show up in a bunch of different ways. We don't only show up in the very specific ways that you see on TV or on Instagram and stuff like that. So like this is also to connect them to the queer adults that a lot of times they are sorely missing in their lives. And so again, this is just to give them that picture. And so at this point, we are creating a name, we're creating our mission and vision together, and just kind of how are we moving forward in this space that is very much theirs and is being helped guided in the ways that this grant was written by the adults. But really, this is about youth-adult partnership. It is about moving together. And to make this equitable, we're meeting on Zoom. We're meeting on Zoom. We, again, are trying to make sure that we are hitting or trying to like ask people if they know of any queer young people of color who are interested in this so that they can join. And we are continuously adapting to what we need. And that comes as it comes, but we have enough funding for 30 youth because we pay them for each time they come. We also know that oftentimes what stops young people from being able to do these types of things is that sometimes they have a job, sometimes they have something else. So we financially will also be kind of reimbursing them for the time that they spend on this project as well. So all of those things are kind of where we are at the beginning. And I'll wrap up with that. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. I just put a note in the chat that we'll stay on for a few extra minutes here. And Danielle, I didn't get to ask you if you could. Okay, so and if anyone has to leave, we're recording, so you'll be able to follow up on anything. If anyone has any questions, just go ahead and set them in there. Danielle, I have a really quick follow-up. Where do you all get your funding from? I wanted to acknowledge, funders that are funding this kind of work. I'll add in there, our funding is from the Annie Casey Foundation, which is supports students, kids and youth in these areas as a foundational mission. So I'm curious where your funding is from, so others might be able to think about that.
Yeah, for sure. It's from the Colorado Health Foundation.
Excellent. Okay, great. Well, if we could just spend a few minutes, thank you all so much. There are no greater advocates, I think, than what we represent today for programs to support youth in the spaces you described. I think Kelly said it in the chat, like, imagine if we could all have experienced your programs as kids. Like, I think we all would have loved that too. And so thank goodness you're carving that space out for kids today. A question was asked, and I kind of want to just expand it also, but we know that like identifying and getting access to kids, young people, to these types of programs is a challenge. And then, just having them come, show up, and stay. So what would you say to people who are trying to put programs like this together around that challenge? What tips do you have or suggestions for engagement and access?
You said for the students or providers?
So access for students. I'm wondering from a program perspective, what do we do about that challenge? How do we address that problem?
Oof, I think it's a tough one. I think it's a somewhat at this point a slightly moving target, just because the needs are so unique for each individual person. So the approach has to be really intentional, I think, to speak to students where they are, and even in that, there's still layers, right? So I think just really, if we approach it with that in mind, then we can work towards something that ultimately is beneficial for them and everybody involved. But that takes intentionality, it takes relationship building, and a lot of times people don't take the time to build relationships with the kids. Like you said, Danielle was talking about that a little bit, and just they want to hang out. That is what they want to do. They want to be able to be together. They want to be able to do all the things. I mean, I can attest and have heard that a lot, like, especially with the challenge of being in person during this time, and with some of the things that we've dealt with the pandemic, it's really made it challenging, especially for them. Even in the Zoom space, like I know all of my students are zoomed out. They're like, they do it because that's how we connect as well, with some of the location challenges. But they want to be able to be amongst each other. They want to be able to talk amongst each other and do some of the things too, which it's an accountability thing also at that point. But the more they know that they are supported, the more they are willing to show up.
Yeah. Danielle and Kini, do you have any additions?
Yeah, I just want to recognize, and you're talking about both of you being nimble, right? It's like when youth show up, you really are meeting them where they're at, and you might have a plan for the day, but it's just giving them that safe space to be themselves and to decide where it's going, right? And so I think it's the adults that need to learn to be nimble and adapt to the youth that we're serving. And I think you said it, when they feel connectedness, and like they matter, and they can heal, they will show up. So thank you for your work, both your programs. It's right from the heart, for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna just echo. I think it's about that, like showing up and listening and being transparent about things. I think along the way, like if they're wanting to see a specific change, however, that is a change that is difficult because of funding reasons, or for like, it just takes time. Like, it's just not something you could do overnight. Being able to just like have that conversation with them and just be like, listen, our limitation here is X, Y, Z. We are going to try to think as many ways around it. But if we can't, like, that is our limitation. And like, how can we still work within this limitation to meet some of the things that we still want? Kind of not like just throwing in the towel, but also like letting them know that we also have our own spaces that we are pushing up against. And at times we can't always do all the things that we want to.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to ask one final question, and we have some folks who are still hanging on, so thank you all so much. I don't know if anyone has other questions. I can't thank you enough for your time today. And it's kind of piggybacking on what you just said, Danielle, but like, I think a lot of us on this call like want to do something, and we see this huge need, and we've mentioned COVID a few times as changing and making things even more difficult. What can we do as a community of organizations and people trying to help youth better? Like, what can we do better? Do we need to coordinate better as adults so that we are, providing things in different ways for young people? Do we need more funding for this? Is there policy? You know, I'm wondering from like even a systems lens, like what can we do right now to address, because the need is so much greater than the services available.
Yeah, I mean, I just saw collaboration over competition in the chat, and I mean, I am feeling that. So many of us are doing such great work that, like, what would it feel like for us to like uplift each other's work instead of like being in competition all the time. However, because of the way that funding works, there's also that weird competition piece, and so I think that there just needs to be again, transparent conversation about that. Like, we want to support each other, and like we also want to have this programming, and like maybe there are ways we can figure that out. But I think when it comes to that other piece, as I said, I work on another project, and they do root cause analyses of tobacco use in their communities. And something that we hear a lot of the time is there's not youth spaces. Period. There's just not youth spaces. And so a lot of young folks see that and feel it, and they automatically know that they're not as important because the spaces where they could be are not there. And so what does that lead to? It leads to young folks trying other things to fill up their time, as people would. And so like that, again, that's my other project. But what we're seeing is that young people really are wanting these spaces where they get to be with each other, and where they also get to build good relationships with adults. I mean, a lot of times that would mean specific youth spaces where both those things are able to happen.
Wow.
I just want to call out a wonderful program in Maine. We have more than one, but one program that has really shifted their work through this Cultivating Mattering, but just recognizing the power of being outdoors, right? Open space, right? Just being in nature and how healing that is. And just, you know, whether it's hikes or just walks, or, you know, take advantage of the ocean or water that's in your community, is just creating safe spaces for youth in nature, right? So they want to spend time, and how important that is to their health and their well-being. So it's, yeah, just there's no one pathway, right? It's just, yeah. And I think for funders too, is just, I always think about, you know, these 2-year grants or 3-year grants, you're just getting the work going, right? So maybe a longer 10, maybe it's 5 years as an example.
Excellent. Okay, last word, pause.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think agree with Daniel, everybody, first of all, but Daniel about the need for the conversation to be had, because I think some part of that competition, unfortunately, is funder based, or, you know, stems from funding, you know, priorities, or trying to fit into these funding buckets and all of these different things, you know, and or the funders not necessarily being explicit about supporting, you know, that collaboration in a sense, and some mindset stuff, because like you said, the need is continuing to increase and grow. And I don't know that, you know, there's no need for competition at the end of the day. We're all trying to serve kids, even if we're working with the same kid. There's things that, you know, we do that maybe other folks don't do, or they do that we don't do. So, you know, I don't think there's just one way, of, you know, people have to just deal with one organization, or, you know, just any one thing. We need to find ways to figure out how we can be intentional just about working together. And I think it just starts with us and wanting to do it.
Amazing. I think there were some really important lessons here in the last 10 minutes. So thank you very, very much for staying on. We try not to go over on our webinars, but this is rich discussion, and you three are, I mean, heart from the heart was true. I think we all felt that today, the work that you do. And I just want to say, you know, thank you for all that work, the way that you love kids, the way that you are turning your journey into turning it back around to help kids is pretty amazing. So we will end here. I feel like we could just sit here and work on this together. So I would encourage everyone who's still here, or anyone who listens, to think about collaboration and the way that we can work together to build up this kind of support for our youth. And it's just a real pleasure to start building that community with you all here during this, and hopefully going forward. So thank you for your connections today and your time and everyone who joined, and just really looking forward to working on these big, hard issues together in the future. So thank you all so much. We'll end there. And, if you have questions for folks, let us know. We'll connect you with our speakers following this. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Whoops.